Welcome back to the Hardcore Italians podcast, everybody. Today we're joined by a true icon. You know her as Ellen Griswold from the legendary Vacation movies, but her career goes far beyond that. From acclaimed performances in films like American History X to her early beginnings as a singer, in anything she does, she always lights up the screen. Please welcome Beverly D'Angelo.
Yeah, da 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 da
Look,
da
I'm with you, the paisans. Look at us, a
da
couple paisans.
da. I'm
I'm
so
so
happy to do this. Because I look like this, but I'll tell you something about that.
yeah.
I rarely get, the tag for, oh, you're Italian. I'm very Italian. And in fact, when I went back to my grandparents' hometown of Introdacqua in Abruzzi, everybody looked like me.
Really?
Everybody looked like me, same features, same body type. Not a lot of blondes, but Introdoc was like 60 miles straight east of Rome. So it's central, really.
Yeah,
Well,
so
in a way,
but even
it's
like
not
'cause you have blue eyes. I'm sure in that area too, people have blue eyes a lot.
blue eyes in my hometown, 900 people. They're all 1,000 years old. All the young people have left. My grandfather's house was for sale, actually.
Oh
It's
wow.
fascinating. It's a fabulous place. It's medieval, and there's a big tower at the very, it's kind of like on a slope like this, and there's a big tower at the very top, and that was a tower that was built in feudal times when they all revolted
Oh wow, I
and
didn't know that.
formed their own commune. And so they built the town, and then, now it's all the way down to the highway, but as things would, become too old, they just moved down further. My grandfather's house is all stone, and the first floor, was for the animals. And the upper floor was a couple of rooms where they slept. I regret I didn't buy it, but anyway.
Oh, that's okay. Well, no, it's great. I know, I guess I'm from the south. I'm from Calabria. So, as they always
Calabria,
say, yeah, they say testa dura, right? The hard heads.
Stadura, yeah.
It's very true. I even got the Calabria logo tattooed on my arm. That's how I like to be really in touch with my Italian culture.
Tell me about your background.
Yeah, so I'm from well, I was born in Toronto, Canada. Actually, Mike, the owner of Hardcore Italians, he's actually in Italy for his honeymoon. That's why he couldn't join today. But him and I, we co-host these together.
No,
And
I have a whole D'Angelo, extended relatives in Hamilton.
oh, you do?
Yeah, yeah, I do because the on my grandfather came over first, and then my grandmother was a letter bride. Like her mom sent out letters to all the boys who had
Yeah.
left. And I just found out recently, actually, from my relatives in Hamilton when I was up there a year ago, that she was originally supposed to marry a guy in Boston, but he died. She
Oh,
came over when she
shoot.
was 17, and so she went on to Ohio where my grandfather was, but his contingent, they came down through the St. Lawrence Seaway. So that's why they ended up in Toronto and the surrounding suburbs like Hamilton. So your people must have come through the St. Lawrence Seaway and not Ellis Island.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Do you ever come to Toronto sometimes or no? Like, do you come to
By
Canada?
what?
Do you come to Toronto, Canada often at all or no? Do you come?
Um, Not too often. It's funny. I was there though. I was in the Canadian Niagara Falls area for an autograph convention a year ago, and actually, at the very moment, there's a little part in a film that my friend Peter Facinelli's doing in Toronto, and I'm trying to make it work. It's only 5 days, but I'm just trying to make it work with all the other stuff. It's hard to do. It's
Yeah.
we're trying to work it out. But if so, then I would be in Toronto sometime between August 15th and September 24th, I guess.
Well, let me know whenever you're down. I would love to see if we can meet up, take a picture, go for a
Sure.
drink or a meal. It'd be awesome. It'd be really nice to meet in
Well,
person.
I immigrated to Canada. I lived in Toronto.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I don't think I read that
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, I did. I lived in Toronto. I went there. I got my immigrant status in 1971. Um, but I had this. I'd come out to California right after high school at 17 to work at Hanna-Barbera Cartoon Studios, but it was 1969 and like everything was exploding. So I had like about a year and a half of this commune life. And I was on a commune in British Columbia when this a friend of mine, and I had a little square dance band there, and this friend of mine was recording in Toronto. He said, if you can make it to Toronto, you can do all background vocals on this album I'm going to make. And so I took a train to Toronto, and for me, it was like the promised land. I immigrated actually as a studio vocalist, but I loved Toronto. And in 1981, when I had the option to become a citizen or not, I didn't take it because I just married an Italian.
Yep,
So
I read that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, um, and that, I kind of regret that because I think, Toronto is really the birthplace of my artistic soul, I think.
Oh,
I really
that's
do.
nice.
Yeah, and I love Canada. And I'll tell you something funny. Just recently, a week ago, I was doing a movie in New Orleans for all of May and sorry, end of May to all of June. And I went from New Orleans to Buffalo, but there was a whole foul up with the flights. So I ended up flying to Washington, D.C., then Detroit, and then driving from Detroit with someone I'd met, driving to Buffalo from Detroit, and we took the Canadian route. So we went through St. Catharines.
Oh, yes, that's nice that
But I
area.
said to Marco, this guy that I was driving with, I said, "Can you feel it? Like it's just different." And it is. There's just a vibe in Canada from the minute you get off the plane or across the border, you feel it, and you feel it coming back.
Everyone's
You
so
know,
nice. That's the thing. Everyone's just so nice and polite here. I hope
just
most people. You get some of the a-holes here, but we
I
try.
know. Yeah.
One of the main reasons I wanted to have you on, obviously, again, there's a lot to go over here about your work and about your career. But I grew up watching obviously the vacation movies. That's where I first recognized you. Even as a kid, my that was the movies my parents showed me as a kid. And what I really love about those films is that before that, before you played the role of Ellen Griswold, movie wives and comedies were usually pretty one-dimensional. But yours was like you were like the real partner in crime with obviously Chevy Chase, and you were like reacting to all the chaos happening. You weren't just like looking at it, like observing it. You really broke the mold with that character. Do you feel like that character helped shift the way women were written in comedies going forward?
I couldn't say that at all, but I do know this, that there were some changes that I made. And some things that in hindsight, some things that I brought to that. First of all, I modeled it on my mom. Because I'd say, I'll tell you one thing, before I get to the answer to that. I think, and look, and I'm saying this with, no modesty whatsoever, but I really do feel that Ellen Griswold was the original MILF, you know.
I didn't want to say that, but can I just say it's true?
I
It
think
really
that's
was.
true.
It
I
really
think
was. I'm glad you
I
embraced that, though. I'm glad you actually embraced that.
I'm embracing it. I think it's true. And if there's a difference between pre-Griswolds and post-Griswolds as far as, what the wife was, it'd be that. Um, but anyway, I viewed those movies. Well, first of all, the first one was supposed to be a satire, and then it was a big surprise that everybody was, instead of laughing at the Griswolds, they identified with the Griswolds. That was a surprise to me. Chevy claims he knew all along, but it was an R-rated film. It wasn't geared for families, it wasn't PG. But anyway, after that, the rest were more. But I saw it, I viewed it as a kind of romantic comedy, like a love story, because speaking of my mother, my mother was devoted to her family, her husband, that whole concept that there's a woman behind the man, and took my father from being an on-the-road musician, first generation Italian, to being a big broadcasting executive and supported him all the way and cleaned him up and did all that kind of stuff. But most of all, there was never any hint in that family. I grew up witnessing a great love affair, but the concept of divorce or quitting or, hey, that's not going to work for me, that I wasn't exposed to that. It wasn't in our vocabulary. And so in that ways, it was traditional, but because there was such a great love between my mom and dad, it didn't seem like a stretch, you know? So when I looked at Ellen, I thought, you know what? I decided that she met him in college. This was her first love, her true love, and that's her commitment. So the way that one key change that I did make was there's a scene where Ellen looks out over the balcony of their hotel room and she sees Clark and Christy in the pool.
Yep.
And I have a scour on my face and everything. And when they went to shoot that scene, it had been written as an all-out scream where he would come into the room and I would throw the shoes at him and say, "Is that what you want? I'll show you fun," like just to be totally infuriated.
Yeah.
And I said, "I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that because the lines as written were, do you love her? Is that what you want?" And I said, I think that that's a genuine question. I think she's naive enough and is devoted enough to him to really want to know if he loves this woman in the swimming pool. And I said, I think she's just, pretending to be in bed doing something else, like she, hadn't seen it or so, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
did not like that. And that she genuinely, wants to know if he loves her. And that set the tone for the whole scene, you know, where he genuinely responded to, "No, I don't." Whereas if it had gone another way, where you had seen an infuriated, jealous, hate-mongering woman, you know, it would have served the purpose of isolating Clark on his quest to do all this stuff for his family. But I didn't feel that that was valid. I felt that Ellen was really, really in there with him, that they were partners. And that was, I feel like that made a little difference in the dynamic and in the portrayal and kind of locked in, that couple
Yeah,
in
it
a way.
really, yeah, exactly. And that's what I was trying to say too. Like, because you before these movies, you didn't really see that. You guys really were like in it together, which I feel like why audience really connected with it. Because in real life, that's how it usually is. It's the wife and the husband both going through the chaos. It's not like the typical, the wife saying something and then the husband in the movie delivers the punchline.
Something funny.
Yeah.
Um, so when they did that reboot in 2015,
Oh, with Ed Helms, right?
yeah, yeah, the
Yeah.
the powers that be decided it's not going to be about me and Chevy as grandparents. It's they're going to cast Rusty as a grown-up guy who wants to make the trip that, his family failed at, right? And she didn't say it to me, but I read in an interview in some of the publicity that Christina Applegate had said that, you know, the Ellen Griswold of old was antiquated and not liberated, and that she was going to bring, a contemporary wife to the picture who stood up for herself. And I thought that's interesting because again, my age, I'm 73, and as I said, I was out here in California in 1969 when all that stuff was happening. So I was on the first cusp of this idea of women's lib and free love and do your own thing and, anti-drag. I mean, like all that stuff. I was right in the heart of it. And my mother was never, I would never have called her anti-feminist. But when I think of how she lived her life and how she role modeled for me, it was very neo-feminist because she's a highly educated woman, had a 4-year violin scholarship to Smith College, graduated summa cum laude, but there was never a sense of any sacrifice coming from her at all. 4 kids, at all. Um, and in that way, I always saw her as being proactive about being a wife, being proactive about being a mother. And I found that when I had kids, which was very late in life, I gave birth to twins at, I don't know why my nose is itchy. Anyway, gave birth to twins at 49. I was very proactive about not working. I looked at the landscape and I thought, well, I want to be physically and emotionally available to these kids. And their father, was working a great deal. So I realized I really couldn't take off for a month or certainly not two to
Mm.
go town and leave my kids in the care of nannies. And that was a proactive choice of mine that was easy to make because I understood the responsibility. I didn't feel it as a sacrifice because it had been role modeled for me that it's a choice. I always had a sense of choice in my life, and that was role modeled. And even, I'll tell you something about my grandmother.
Yeah.
My grandmother Rosina, her maiden name was Volpe. Um, uh, she, as I said, was a letter bride, and when I was doing Coal Miner's Daughter, a film you didn't mention, but that was a very important film for me. That kind of
Mm.
got me on the map. I did the film of Hair where I sang, and then Coal
They
Miner's
were
Daughter.
both musicals. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of how I got into, film. I'd starred in a Broadway musical, and that just it didn't open the door for a recording contract. It opened the door for acting. Anyway, so I had done the pre-record for Coal Miner's Daughter in Nashville, and I was flying back to Los Angeles through Columbus. And I stopped, went over to my grandma's house, and she was, of course, crocheting a top for me while I was there. I don't know if your grandmother was a knitter or a crocheter, but
Yeah. Yeah. Both of them
yeah,
were. Yeah.
yeah, I was hands busy. So she was making like a little tank top for me sitting there, and I had a Walkman. It was the first year of Walkmans,
Oh, I
you
wish
know.
I had one of those.
Yeah, I had a Walkman. I was really excited about my new expensive gadget. They were like $300 at the time. Something that would be like
Oh.
3,000 now. But anyway, so I wanted to record her, and I said, Nona, what's your? I need your recipes. And she says, well, I don't got no recipes. I said, no, no, no. Give me the recipe for your sauce, right? We called it sauce. You might have, if you were from Toronto, maybe you called it gravy. I never called it gravy.
No, 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 no. It's always sauce for me.
I don't get that gravy
I don't
thing.
get it either. Gravy's just for
I don't
turkey.
know.
Gravy's for turkey.
And I also don't get that whole, cliche of Italian Americans at all. The whole soprano, everybody's mobbed up and like this and they're tough guy. It's not true.
No,
I'm
that's a very small slice of Italian
That's right.
culture in general. It's not who we are. That's a
Well, no, it's funny
misconception.
we're the people who assimilated more than any other nationality, who believed in expanding the world, and we're conquerors. Okay. Anyway, so I said, "What's your recipe?" And she goes, "Well," I said, "Come on, how do you make your sausage?" She goes, "Well, I put some tomato and then I put put the olive oil and put a little bit of garlic." I said, "Grandma," she said, "What?" Like she didn't have any recipes, but everything she made was fantastic. She was the kind of person who you'd go over to her house and bring your friends, and she'd go into the kitchen on the formica table, make these mounds of flour, break an egg into each one, roll them out, put them through the thing she had a hand cranked one,
Oh yeah,
drape
the
them on,
old school ones. Yep, yep.
she had a hand cranked one. I've got a hand cranked one. But anyway, and hang the noodles over the back of the chairs, and then you'd eat like within the hour. They
Mhm.
always had a pot of wedding soup going. There was always somebody was always made. Do you have the wedding soup? Did you
With the
do
with
the
the
wedding?
with the meatballs in it, right?
Teeny, teeny, teeny little meatballs.
Oh, so
And then,
good. I have those. I
yeah,
have those all the time during the winter. The winter is the perfect time
that's
to have
right.
them.
That's right. That's right. And she would make it with the dandelion greens that she got down by the railroad tracks.
We call it chicoria. Is that what you guys call it too?
Yeah, chicoria, yeah. But dandelion greens, they're like chicory and they're like escarole. She would use
Escargot.
escarole.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah, that's so cool.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. And my love of cooking came from. But anyway, so I'm sitting there and I said to her, you know, what's love? She goes, well, I don't know. And I went, Grandma, come on. You were married for 50 years before Grandpa. Because she would always say, I'd say, how are you? She said, just to wait, and just to wait, and I want to see Grandpa. Anyway, I said, come on, you were married for 50 years, you had 6 kids. She threw herself in the grave when we buried Grandpa. Like we had to like pull her back. She wanted to throw,
Yeah, it's
kind of
it's
a
tough. Yeah,
cliche.
for the nonnies, it's yeah, they don't take it well at all.
So anyway, I said, come on, you have to know what love is. I said, well, what was that all about? What were you doing, marrying Grandpa? And she said, well, I wanted to come to America.
That was the answer?
I wanted to come to America. And that was the way.
But
So
he's, yeah.
she had that adventurous thing, but of course, she knew what love was, but she was not really, she wasn't, she didn't read or write. So,
They look at it different, I think, the old school Italians, right? Like they get married very young and they have a bunch of kids. Their idea of love is not like how it is now, which is not a bad thing. It's just their values are different. And to be
so that's
honest, the
different value system, yeah.
yeah, but I find it back then like they were tougher people. Like the nonnies are tougher than like 90% of people nowadays.
And I auditioned for that movie that was made called Nona's, but I
Oh, you
didn't
did
get it.
for what? Do you know which role? Can you say or?
I don't, it might have been the Susan Sarandon role when I finally watched it, but I was just auditioning in general. I didn't know which role he wanted, but I was really fighting for that. But he just said, "You're not Italian enough," and I thought, "Fuck you,"
Can you
but
believe
not
that?
okay. Well, no, it happened to me all my life. I auditioned for Sopranos, and in my audition tape, I said, "Come on, it's time." I swear to God, I'm Italian. I really am. I speak it. I lived there. I married
Well, you
there.
look You actually do look Italian too. You actually do.
I know. I
So
know.
that's like how I'm not sure if you know, like that they did the same thing with Stallone. He auditioned, or not. It was for like a non-speaking role for The Godfather, and there was an interview. He said I didn't even get to do it because they say you're not Italian enough. And it's
Mm.
like literally a guy, Sylvester Stallone. You don't get more Italian than that name, first of all. Looks Italian. He's got the typical dark hair, the dark features, tall,
Yeah,
muscular.
that's
Come
weird.
on, it's ridiculous.
But the thing is that, there is such a preconceived notion of what it is to be Italian. And, all I can say is that I feel that I'm the quintessential Italian. And you know why? Now, my mother was white Anglo-Saxon Protestant.
Yeah,
This is why I'm the quintessential Italian, because Italians in the entire history were a nation of explorers, conquerors, assimilators.
yeah.
And if you really track it, the desire of that. You want to know a fun fact? The biggest emigration of any one country to any other one country in global history, was Italy to the United States. More Italians left Italy for the United States and landed in the United States than any other nation. The Irish they had a big
Hmm.
influx, but it was much smaller numbers. But the difference between Italians and every other group is that, yes, sure, we'd have our little Italies and stuff like that, but it wasn't as closed as the other, if you want to call it ethnic, it wasn't as closed off as the other ethnic groups. And, I found in general, I mean, I have met like, first generation Italians who are very kind of conservative and right wing kind of thing. But in general, I always found a certain expansiveness. I wouldn't tie it to a political party,
Yeah,
but a certain expansiveness and an acceptance of a large world. And I think Italians, I think our race, if you wanted to call it a race, we have genetically that kind of point of view that there's a world out there.
yeah.
It's not just like these little people in this little section.
I yeah.
Even in the little towns, there's a kindness, there's a hospitality that's extended to any tourist. Tourist rate is huge in Italy. Why? Because of the people.
The people, the culture, the history, it's
Right.
everything combined.
Yeah, abbondanza. Yeah, you're like,
But yeah, exactly. It's cool because even like Italians were a culture of art. Like we're artists. Like not even
that's
just
right.
literal artists, but like for example, even yourself, like you wear so many hats. You're an actor, you're a singer, you do so many things. And actually the singing is actually interesting because I know nowadays you see a lot of these musicians that do both acting and they also sing. You were in a time when I read that you wrote that
Yeah, nobody did that.
you couldn't do that. So you had to make a choice, right? So,
We
for
had made
example, I know like in Vegas Vacation, you had that moment where you sang with Wayne Newton, which was one of the most
yeah.
iconic scenes of all time. Even when you hit that high note, that was so funny. But like, do you like look forward to finding roles that where you get to sing as well as act? Like, is that
Not, no, I really don't sing much anymore. In fact, a year ago, I participated in a tribute to Patsy Cline, and I sang one song, and oh my God, I had to work on my voice for a full month to just because I lost my high range. The thing about singing is, if you don't use it, you lose it. And
yeah,
I have sung for a really long time. But the acting, I've been becoming very fulfilled by acting. I've had a lot of work certainly in the past year and a half, and just before the strike was, I kind of went back to work for real in 2021, and then 2023 was a drag, and I sorry, 2024 was a drag with the strike and everything, but
yeah.
yeah, yeah, but
But
I'm finding a lot of fulfillment in acting, and that's a completely different. It's a completely different way of expression than singing is. With singing, you got to be very careful with your voice, and
it,
I'm
it
not.
yeah, I know, but but still like I know it's hard to juggle both anyways. If you were to do both, it's tough, right? So I give credit to people nowadays who do both. But like,
Yeah,
you're
it's a different world. I mean, even there was a time when if you were in film, you wouldn't do television.
yeah, that's the thing too. They said if you went to television, it's like you're going backwards in your career.
Changed a lot.
It's the
Everything's
landscape's always change, yeah. Like, and that's why I
so.
like, yeah, I like how even for yourself, like you've been so successful with comedies, but even when you do a drama like American History X, first off, that role like it earns you a Satellite Award nomination, which you should have.
Yeah.
Can I be honest? You should have got an Oscar as best supporting actress,
But
because
but a lot of those things, a lot of the award, there's an award circuit, there's publicity that's involved. There's a whole machinery around that.
yeah,
You
and to be honest, I
know,
don't really look at I don't look too deep in with that anyways because it's all that's all just political too, like the awards and stuff. So, but all I
well,
know is that I do
it
think you
helps
were
with
great.
marketing. Helps with marketing. That's what it helps with
That's
marketing.
why they yeah, right. It's a business at the end of the day. They try to do it for a certain
Yeah,
thing.
but it's also wonderful. It's wonderful to get recognition from your peers. But for me, recognition is having a job.
Exactly, right. And the fact that like that there's a scene in that movie which when you're in the prison scene with Ed Norton when you're talking with
I,
him
I improvised that.
oh you improvise that?
That was
That
improvised.
scene almost brought me to tears because like I look at it like okay,
I'm in here with you.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've never been to jail, obviously, but like I watch that scene almost like my mom is talking to me. It's like imagine if I was in that situation. It's heartbreaking to. Was that a really hard role to like even just a movie to be in because of like just the context and like the themes that like it's a very hard movie to watch because it's so very emotionally
Well,
powerful.
I mean, as an actor, you go in and you play your role. I'm someone who's really devoted to the entirety of it. I read the scripts over and over and over and over and over again and visualize the film to really understand what my role is.
Hmm.
Because traditionally there's a lead, there's a supporting, there's a this, there's a that. But if you really, really read that script over and over and over again, what starts to emerge is the entirety of the vision, and you can see what your role really is. Meaning, do you bring a flavor of care, love, hatred, animosity? Like, what's the ingredient that makes this character vital? What's the archetype? Because I think you can break stories down to archetypes. So what's the archetype? What is vital? What is vital about this character? What is that note there? What is that
Yeah.
tone there? What is that chorus or whatever it is? And so for me, there's really no difference between doing a comedy or a drama. And as far as, you know, my expectations, I just try to deliver my most authentic self. I didn't pursue a career. I'm not a careerist ever. And I moved out of Hollywood in 81. I didn't even live in the States till 1991. In 96, I went to New York and kind of pulled back because I was very devoted to getting pregnant and having that family. And then when I did have kids, I seriously pulled back. I did Entourage and I did some TV and some little teeny indies there and stuff. But it wasn't until the summer of 2021 my daughter had to have some surgery, and I was taking care of her. We were in Santa Barbara, and it was a beautiful day, and it's very quiet. And I looked around, and I felt it. I felt this thing in me, and I thought, it's there, that engine, that desire, and that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to the desire to express oneself. And by the way, if I'm a testament to anything, it's to the validity of that desire. And when I say that, I don't mean acting, I don't mean singing, I don't mean performing. I mean embracing that creativity. That creative urge is really important to listen to. And it can be expressed in a nice meal for your family. It can be expressed in how you do your hair, what clothes you put on, how you engage in something, what you expose yourself to, you know, but it's really, really important to keep that alive in all of us. It isn't about, making a career out of it. It's about embracing that creativity in yourself, whether it's a podcast
Yeah.
or, you know, um, a road trip to see the world's biggest tree. It's something that speaks to you on a human level. And if you can stay with that, you can have a good life under any circumstances.
I appreciate the chat today, and I hope we can do this again. And thank you for all the stories and the inspiration. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's so nice to meet you, and it's so great to have been on this. And I hope that everybody that's watching has enjoyed it, and finds their inner spark and pays attention to it today.
Thanks so much,
Okay.
Beverly. Take it easy, okay? Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Ciao.